Arrogant millionaire hires a new maid without knowing she's expecting his child from a night of passion. The champagne spilled on her party dress was nothing compared to the panic Rachel Foster felt now. 3 months later, as she stood at the imposing gate of the Richardson mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, her hands trembled as she adjusted the simple blazer that hid her still imperceptible belly, remembering the night that changed her life. "Miss Foster?" The security guard's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mr. Richardson is waiting." Rachel swallowed, following the stone path that meandered through the immaculate garden. The Georgian facade of the mansion, with its white columns and tall windows, looked even more intimidating than in the photos she had researched. Every step brought her closer to the man she had no idea would be her father, and she intended to keep it that way. At the main entrance, a middle-aged woman with a rigid posture welcomed her. "I'm Margaret Powell, the current housekeeper. Please come with me." Rachel followed Margaret through corridors decorated with works of art that cost more than she would earn in several lifetimes. The sound of her low heels echoed on the marble floor, mixing with the rapid beating of her heart. "Mr. Richardson has dismissed 3 governesses in the last 2 months, Margaret commented in a low voice. "I hope you're more resilient." Before Rachel could reply, a familiar male voice resounded down the corridor. "Powell, leave us alone." Adrian Richardson was standing by the window of his office, his silhouette jagged against the late afternoon light. Rachel felt her stomach turn. He was even more handsome than she remembered from the Carson Foundation masquerade party where it all began. So he turned his blue-gray eyes, studying her coldly. "You're the agency's candidate?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Rachel Foster. She kept her voice steady, silently faking him for using her mother's maiden name that night at the party. Richardson would never associate her with the mysterious woman he had met wearing a Venetian mask. "Your CV is adequate." He flipped through some papers on the mahogany table. "Experience in 3 high-end residences, positive references. But I need to make something very clear. I demand perfection." Rachel nodded, remembering the stories that had circulated about his obsession with control. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Richardson." "No, you don't." He moved closer, his familiar scent making her heart leap. "This house works like a Swiss watch. A single mistake could cost you your job. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir." Rachel held his gaze, even as her knees threatened to buckle. Adrian watched her for a tense moment before continuing. "Your room will be in the West Wing, along with the other employees. Powell will show you your assignments. It starts tomorrow at 6. Rachel left the office feeling dizzy. Margaret was waiting for her in the hallway, ready to show her the rest of the house. As they made their way through the maze of luxurious rooms, Rachel struggled to keep her composure. "Mr. Richardson is demanding," Margaret commented, showing her the main kitchen. "But fair enough, when you prove your worth." Rachel absorbed every detail, every routine explained by Margaret, knowing that her survival in that job depended on it. But her mind kept going back to that night in Boston, 3 months earlier, when a very different Adrian Richardson had made her feel like the most special woman in the world. The room assigned to her was small but comfortable. After Margaret left, Rachel finally let the tears flow, one hand resting on her belly. How would she keep this secret for the next few months? How would she face the man who would change her forever on a daily basis? Her previous life as an event planner in Boston now seemed like a distant dream. The Carson Foundation masquerade party should have been just another event on her resume. Instead, a dance, a few glasses of champagne, and an instant connection with a masked stranger led to a night of passion, and consequences she could never have foreseen. The sound of footsteps in the hallway brought her back to her feet quickly. Through the window, she could see Adrian walking through the garden, talking on the phone. Even from a distance, his presence was magnetic. Rachel closed the curtains, determined to keep her emotions under control. One day at a time, she muttered to herself, organizing her few belongings in the closet. "You can do this." What Rachel didn't know was that, even on that first day, something about her presence had already aroused Adrian's curiosity. Something familiar that he couldn't identify, like a half-forgotten song or a perfume that brings back undefined memories. In the solitude of his office, Adrian found himself thinking about his new housekeeper. There was something in her green eyes, in the way she kept her composure under his scrutiny. Something that reminded him of what? The question bothered him more than he'd like to admit. The sun was setting over Newport, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Rachel watched the spectacle from her window, one hand protectively on her belly, while Adrian, in his office, gazed at the same sky, both trapped in thoughts about the other, connected by a secret that would soon change their lives forever. Rachel's first day as a housekeeper began before the sun had even risen. Her trembling hands adjusted her gray uniform as she tried to contain the morning sickness that had become her constant companion. The clock struck 5:45 when she went down to the main kitchen, finding Margaret already in full swing. "Good morning," Margaret greeted her, hitting her clipboard. "This is the schedule for the day. Mr. Richardson has guests for dinner tonight, Senator Kenneth and his wife." Rachel studied the meticulously organized list, grateful for the distraction from her conflicting thoughts. The mansion was beginning to awaken around her, with other staff members quietly arriving for their duties. "Rachel," Margaret lowered her voice, "there's something I need to mention. Mr. Richardson has been different over the last few weeks. More restless, more demanding than usual. Ever since the masquerade party in Boston Rachel's heart almost stopped. Masquerade party? Yes, from the Carson Foundation. He came back different after that night. Sometimes I catch him looking for something, or someone, but he never comments on it." Before Rachel could process this information, firm footsteps echoed down the corridor. Adrian entered the kitchen, impeccable in his navy blue suit. His eyes met Rachel's for a brief but intense moment. "Foster, I need you to reorganize my office today. Powell will show you the system I prefer." He paused, frowning slightly. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm fine, sir," Rachel replied quickly, fighting a new wave of nausea. Adrian watched her for a moment longer before turning to Margaret about the details of dinner. Rachel took the opportunity to escape into the hallway, taking a deep breath to pull herself together. The day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Rachel plunged into her work, determined to prove herself. In Adrian's office, every document, every object had to be precisely positioned. While organizing a pile of papers, her eyes caught a detail that made her heart leap. A black Venetian mask, carefully stored in an ajar drawer. "Have you found anything interesting?" Adrian's voice surprised her. Rachel quickly closed the drawer. "No, sir. Just organizing as instructed." He moved closer, his familiar scent invading her senses. "You know, there's something about you that intrigues me, Foster. Have we met before?" "I don't think so, sir," she lied, keeping her eyes downcast. Adrian seemed dissatisfied with her answer. "Dinner tonight is important. Make sure everything is perfect." The afternoon turned into evening, and the Richardson mansion was preparing to welcome its illustrious guests. Rachel was overseeing the final details when a sudden dizziness made her stagger. Margaret discreetly supported her. "Darling, you need some rest," the older housekeeper insisted. "I'm fine, I just need—" Rachel didn't finish her sentence. Adrian had just entered the hall, accompanied by Senator Kenneth and his wife. "Ah, Adrian," Mrs. Kenneth smiled. "Still thinking about that mysterious lady from the masquerade party? You need to get over her." Rachel froze, pretending to adjust a nearby floral arrangement. "Charlotte," Adrian replied with a strained smile. "Some memories are hard to forget." Dinner passed without incident, but Rachel felt the weight of the secret growing in her chest. Every time she served at the table, every moment she felt Adrian's gaze on her, was a silent torture. Later, when the guests had left, Rachel found Adrian alone in the library. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, contemplating a glass of whiskey. "Foster," he called out when she tried to withdraw discreetly. "Come here." Rachel approached, her heart pounding. "There's something familiar about you," he murmured, his piercing eyes studying her face. "Your eyes remind me of someone I used to know." "It must be a coincidence, sir," she replied, grateful for the soft lighting that concealed her blush. "Perhaps." Adrian stood up, moving dangerously closer. Or maybe, just then his cell phone rang, breaking the spell of the moment. Rachel took the opportunity to escape, her heart thundering in her chest. Back in her room, She finally let the tears fall. On her bedside table, a small ultrasound photo was carefully hidden between the pages of a book. Rachel picked it up, tracing the outlines of the little life growing inside her. "How am I going to keep this a secret?" she whispered to herself, knowing that each day would be harder than the last. In the hallway, footsteps approached her room. Rachel quickly put the photo away when someone knocked on the door. It was Margaret, carrying a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," the older housekeeper offered with a kind smile. "And perhaps someone to talk to?" Rachel hesitated, considering how much longer could she carry this secret alone. Rachel stared at the steaming cup of tea offered by Margaret, her heart torn between the need to get it off her chest and the fear of the consequences. After a moment's hesitation, she invited the older housekeeper in. "How long have you worked for Mr. Richardson?" Rachel asked, trying to keep the conversation on safe territory. 15 years, Margaret replied, taking a seat in the only chair in the room while Rachel remained on the edge of the bed. "I've seen Adrian grow from an ambitious young executive to the man he is today, especially after his parents died in the helicopter crash." Rachel absorbed the information, remembering the vulnerability she had seen in Adrian's eyes that night in Boston, when he had briefly mentioned the loss of his family. "He's changed a lot since then," Margaret continued, her voice soft. "But in the last few weeks, well, I've never seen him so upset as after that masquerade party." Rachel's stomach churned, and it wasn't just because of her pregnancy. "What do you mean?" "He spends hours in the office looking at that mask. Sometimes I find him wandering the corridors at dawn. And now," Margaret paused meaningfully, "since you arrived, he's different." "Different how?" Rachel tried to keep her voice neutral. "More attentive, observant, as if something about you intrigues him." Margaret leaned forward. "Rachel, darling, if there's anything you need to tell me." A firm knock on the door interrupted the conversation. "Foster?" Adrian's voice startled both women. "I need to talk to you." Margaret quickly stood up, exchanging a meaningful glance with Rachel before opening the door. Adrian was standing in the hallway, his tense posture revealing that something was troubling him. "In my office." "Now?" He turned and left without waiting for an answer. Rachel followed him down the silent corridor, her mind racing with possibilities. Had he discovered something? Her heart pounded as they entered the office, with a light from the lamp created dancing shadows on the walls. "Close the door," Adrian ordered, positioning himself behind his desk. "I found this afternoon." He slid an envelope across the polished surface. Rachel picked it up with trembling fingers, her blood freezing as she recognized the badge of the medical clinic where she'd had her last ultrasound. "It was among the papers you organized," Adrian continued, his eyes fixed on her. "I imagine it has an explanation." Rachel took a deep breath, her mind working frantically. "It's a routine appointment, sir. Nothing serious." "Don't lie to me." His voice was dangerously calm. "The envelope is addressed to Dr. Morrison's obstetrics clinic." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel could hear her own heart beating in her ears as Adrian studied her intensely. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. Rachel nodded slightly, unable to find her voice. "Why didn't you mention that in the interview?" Adrian stood up, coming around the table. "That kind of information is crucial to the position." Rachel swallowed. "I needed the job." "What about Dad?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. He's not there," she managed to say, technically not lying. Adrian ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Rachel recognized from the night they met. "That complicates things." "I can keep working," Rachel hastened to say. "I won't let it interfere with my duties." "It's not that simple," Adrian sighed, moving closer to her. "There are legal responsibilities to consider. The mansion isn't exactly an environment set up for." He stopped abruptly, his eyes catching something on Rachel's face. She could smell his perfume, the same one that had intoxicated her that night, and she fought the dizziness that swept over her. "Your eyes," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I've seen." The sound of breaking glass in a corridor startled them. Rachel took advantage of the distraction to step back, creating distance between them. "If you prefer me to resign," she began. "No," the answer was quick, surprising them both. "You stay, but we'll need to make adjustments. And I want Dr. Morrison to accompany you. He's the best obstetrician in Newport." Rachel blinked, confused by the sudden show of concern. "I can't accept." "I'm not asking," Adrian interrupted her. "Consider it part of your benefits." Before Rachel could protest, Margaret appeared in the doorway, apologizing for the interruption. Adrian waved for Rachel to leave, but when she reached the door, he called her name once more. "Foster, is there anything else you want to tell me?" Rachel felt the weight of her secret like a lead blanket on her shoulders. "No, sir. Nothing more." Back in her room, Rachel let the tears roll silently. Somewhere in the mansion, a clock struck midnight, marking the end of another day of secrets and half-truths. But how much longer could he keep his mask in place? The news of Rachel's pregnancy spread quickly among the staff at the Richardson mansion. The curious looks and whispers in the corridors followed her like shadows, but nothing compared to the change in Adrian's behavior. Over the next week, he started showing up in the most unlikely places in the mansion, always with some seemingly plausible excuse. In the laundry, he had to personally check that his shirts were being washed properly. In the kitchen, he suddenly developed an interest in preparing the daily menu. "Mr. Richardson?" Rachel confronted him one morning when she found him inspecting the towel arrangement in the hall closet. "Can I help you with something specific?" "Just making sure everything is in order," he replied, his gaze lingering a little longer than necessary on her figure. The small curve in her belly, previously imperceptible, now seemed to shout its presence from beneath the uniform. "Sir," she hesitated, "I appreciate your concern, but I can assure you that I am perfectly capable of carrying out my duties." Adrian took a step towards her, and Rachel felt the familiar scent of his cologne envelop her senses. "Your first appointment with Dr. Morrison is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Jenkins will take you." "That's not necessary, I'm not asking for your opinion, Foster." His tone was firm, but there was something else in his voice, a note of genuine concern that made her heart squeeze. That night, alone in her room, Rachel reread for the 100th time the email she had received from her old colleague in Boston. Caroline had been the only person she had trusted with her secret before she left. "You ought to tell him, Ratch. The longer it goes on, the worse it will be." The sound of a heated argument in the hallway interrupted her thoughts. It was Adrian's voice, followed by that of a woman she didn't recognize. "You can't go on obsessing about a ghost, Adrian." The female voice sounded exasperated. "That woman from the party clearly doesn't want to be found." Rachel quietly approached the door, her heart hammering. "Victoria, you don't understand," Adrian replied, his voice lower but intense. "There's something going on. I can't explain it. It's because of the pregnant housekeeper, isn't it?" Victoria asked. "Is that why you insist on keeping her here? Because something about her reminds you of that night?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to contain her agitated breathing. "You're being ridiculous," Adrian finally replied, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. The footsteps moved away, and Rachel let herself slip to the floor, her back against the door. The situation was becoming untenable. Adrian was getting closer and closer to the truth, and she had no idea how he would react when he found out. The next morning, during her appointment with Dr. Morrison, Rachel could barely concentrate. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a gentle smile, noticed her unease. "Is everything all right, Miss Foster?" he asked while performing the ultrasound. "Your stress levels seem high." "It's just work," she lied, watching the small figure on the screen. "Oh, yes," the doctor smiled. "We can hear the heart now." The rhythmic, accelerated sound filled the room, and the tears Rachel had been holding back escaped. It was real as the secret she was carrying. Back at the mansion, Rachel found Adrian waiting in his study. He looked up from the papers he was reading, and something in his expression made her freeze. "How was the appointment?" he asked, his tone far too casual. "Fine," she replied, handing him the envelope containing the tests he had requested. "Everything's normal." Adrian opened the envelope, his eyes quickly scanning the documents until they stopped on something. His expression changed subtly. 12 weeks, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Rachel felt her blood run cold in her veins. The masquerade party had been exactly 12 weeks ago. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice almost a whisper. Adrian stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her take a step back. You know what's interesting, Foster? I was going through my diary for the last few months, and something caught my eye. Rachel felt her legs go weak. Sir, exactly 12 weeks ago, I was at a party in Boston, a masquerade party. He moved closer, each step deliberate, and I met someone with green eyes very similar to yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel could hear her own heart beating in her ears, competing with the echo of the beat she had heard earlier in the doctor's office. Mr. Richardson, I dash. No, he interrupted her, his voice low but intense. I think it's time we let the mask fall, don't you, Rachel? Rachel's world seemed to slow down as Adrian's words hung in the air between them. The office, with its mahogany-paneled walls and panoramic view of Newport, suddenly seemed too small to contain the tension that enveloped them. How long did you intend to keep up this charade? Adrian asked, his voice controlled, but Rachel could feel the storm brewing behind his apparent calm. I didn't, she began, but the words died in her throat when he held up his hand. 12 weeks, he continued, walking over to the drawer where he kept the Venetian mask. For 12 weeks I looked for you in every face in Boston, and now I find out that you were here, right under my nose, carrying my child. Rachel felt her legs weaken and had to lean on the nearest chair. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No. Adrian laughed humorlessly, taking the black mask out of the drawer. And how exactly was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to wait until the baby was born? Or maybe just disappear again? I needed the job, Rachel admitted, her voice trembling. When I saw the job advertisement, I didn't know it was your house. And then it got too complicated. Adrian approached, still holding the mask. His blue-gray eyes seemed to pierce through every layer of protection she had built up. Complicated? You're carrying my son, Rachel. My heir. And you chose to hide like a maid in my own house. It wasn't an easy choice, she protested, feeling tears start to form. You're Adrian Richardson? No, Eddie. That night was magic, he added, his voice softening for a moment. It was magic, and you know it. What I don't understand is why you ran away the next morning without even leaving a real name. The silence that followed was interrupted by a knock on the door. Margaret entered, stopping abruptly as she sensed the tension in the room. Excuse me, Mr. Richardson, but Mr. Morrison is on the line. Adrian didn't look away from Rachel. Tell him I'll be back in a few minutes. When Margaret left, Rachel finally found her voice. I didn't plan any of this. The pregnancy, working here, was fate playing a cruel trick. Cruel? Adrian arched an eyebrow. Do you have any idea what I've been through these past few weeks? The feeling that I was losing my sanity because I couldn't get you out of my head, and now I find out that not only were you here, but that you're expecting my child. Rachel felt a wave of dizziness and had to sit up. Adrian was immediately at her side, his anger momentarily replaced by concern. Are you all right? He asked, a hand on her shoulder. I just need a moment. She took a deep breath, all too aware of the warmth of his hand. Rachel, Adrian knelt down in front of her, his eyes now softer. Why didn't you trust me? What made you think I had no right to know about my own son? Because people like you don't fall in love with people like me? She whispered, the words escaping before she could contain them. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian studied her with an intensity that made her heart race, just like that night in Boston. And who said I wasn't in love? He finally replied, his voice low and intense. Rachel held her breath, but before she could reply, the office door opened again. Victoria, the woman from the night before, walked in without ceremony. Adrian, we need to discuss the event of... She paused, observing the scene in front of her. Oh, so it's true. She's the woman from the party. Victoria, now is not the time. Adrian stood up, his posture tensing again. On the contrary, Victoria crossed her arms. This is exactly the time. The council needs to be informed. A baby changes everything, especially considering the unusual circumstances. Rachel stood up, her legs still unsteady. I should go. You're not going anywhere, Adrian declared firmly. Victoria, we can discuss this later. No, Avadian, Victoria insisted. She's an employee, a housekeeper. The council will want guarantees, contracts, absolute discretion. She's the mother of my son, Adrian replied, his voice cutting. and you're speaking in her presence." Rachel watched the clash, feeling increasingly out of place. Her simple world had collapsed in a matter of minutes, and now she was in the middle of a situation that seemed straight out of a novel she should never have been in. "I need some air," she muttered, walking towards the door. "Rachel, wait," Adrian called out to her, but she was already in the hallway, her legs carrying her automatically towards the garden. The fresh Newport air hit her like a wave, bringing with it the reality of her situation. There was no turning back. The mask had fallen, and with it, all her pretensions of keeping her secret. Now all she had to do was face the consequences of her choices, and find out if that connection she had felt with Adrian on that magical night in Boston was strong enough to overcome all the obstacles that were sure to come. Rachel watched the waves come and go on the private beach of the Richardson estate, trying to organize her thoughts. The Newport wind ruffled her hair as she contemplated how her life had turned into something worthy of a novel in just a few hours. "I thought I'd find you here." Adrian's voice surprised her. He had swapped his formal suit for dark pants and a gray cashmere sweater, looking more like the man she had met that night in Boston. "Has Victoria gone?" Rachel asked, without taking her eyes off the ocean. "Yes, and before you ask, she's just a company lawyer. Her opinion on our situation is not relevant." "Our situation," Rachel repeated with a bitter smile. "Is that what we're going to call it?" Adrian approached, stopping beside her. The silence between them was filled only by the sound of the waves and the distant cries of seagulls. "Why that night?" he asked suddenly. "Why did you decide to go to that party?" Rachel closed her eyes, remembering. "I was organizing the event. Caroline, my assistant, insisted that I should enjoy it a bit, since everything was under control. She practically shoved that mask in my hands." "Fate, perhaps?" Adrian suggested, a half-smile on his lips. "Or cruel irony," Rachel replied, finally turning to face him. "Adrian, you need to understand. I grew up in a trailer park in Providence. My mother worked 3 jobs to put me through college. Your world is not my world, and yet that night, when we talked for hours, you didn't seem to care about different worlds. Because that night we were just 2 people. No namus, no pasts, no expectations." Adrian took a step towards her, his hand gently touching her cheek. "And who says we need to be anything other than that now?" Rachel felt her heart race at the familiar touch. "You heard Victoria? There's advice, expectations, your position to consider. What matters to me now is you and our son," he interrupted her, his voice firm. "The rest we can sort out together." Before Rachel could reply, a sudden dizziness made her stagger. Adrian supported her immediately, his strong arms wrapping around her. "You need to rest," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Let's go inside." To her surprise, instead of taking her back to the staff room, Adrian led her into the main wing of the mansion, stopping in front of an elegant suite on the 2nd floor. "This room will be yours now," he declared, opening the door to reveal a luxurious space overlooking the ocean. "Adrian, I can't." "You can and you will," he interrupted her gently. "I'm not going to have the mother of my child sleeping in a servant's quarters." Rachel looked around the sumptuous room, feeling out of place. "What about the other employees? What will they think? That you've been promoted?" A familiar voice answered from the doorway. It was Margaret, carrying a tray of tea and cookies. "And that it's about time Mr. Richardson realized what was right in front of him." Adrian arched an eyebrow at his housekeeper. "Did you know?" "I suspected," Margaret admitted, placing the tray on a side table. "The looks, the coincidences. Sometimes it takes more than a mask to hide what's in the heart." Rachel sat down in a soft armchair, feeling the weight of the last few months finally bear down on her. "What happens now?" Adrian knelt down beside her, taking her hands between his. "Now you rest. Tomorrow we start planning our future. Together." "It's not going to be easy," Rachel warned, thinking of the headlines that were sure to follow, the nasty comments, the expectations of Newport's high society. "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Adrian replied, a soft smile on his lips. "But that night in Boston taught me something important. Sometimes life's best moments come in disguise." Margaret discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone. Rachel looked at their entwined hands, thinking about how a single night of magic had completely changed the course of their lives. "Do you know what intrigues me the most?" Adrian asked softly. "How you managed to keep your disguise for so long, even when I was so close to finding out." "Fear," she admitted. "Fear of not being enough, of not belonging in your world, of disappointing." "Rachel," he interrupted her, his intense gaze fixed on hers. "You gave me something I thought I'd never have, a family. How could that not be enough?" The tears she had been holding back finally escaped, and Adrian pulled her into his arms, his familiar scent enveloping her as it had that first night. Through the window, the sun was beginning to set over Newport, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, as if nature was celebrating this new beginning. "Tomorrow," Adrian murmured against her hair, "we start writing our own story. No masks, no secrets." Rachel nodded against his chest, allowing herself to feel hopeful for the first time in months. The road ahead would be challenging, but maybe, just maybe, modern fairy tales didn't need castles and crowns. Just two hearts willing to face the world together. The news of the Richardson heir spread through Newport with the speed of a dry forest fire. The murmurs began at the exclusive Bailey's Beach Club, where society matrons gathered for their afternoon teas, and soon reached the marble corridors of the Newport Country Club. A housekeeper, Charlotte Kenneth, the senator's wife, whispered to her companions during the Newport Historical Society's benefit luncheon, "Adrian has always been eccentric, but this is too much." Rachel watched the scene from afar, sitting on the porch of the Richardson mansion as she flipped through the latest edition of the Newport Daily News. Her face wasn't on the front page yet, but speculation about this scandalous romance of Rhode Island's most coveted businessman took up an entire column in the society section. "Don't pay any attention to them," Margaret commented, pouring herself a cup of ginger tea to help with her morning nausea. "High society always needs something to gossip about during the summer." "It's not just that," Rachel sighed, stroking her belly which was beginning to show. "It's as if I've suddenly been transported to a parallel universe. Yesterday, I was organizing the cleaning crew schedules. Today I'm being measured for designer dresses." Speaking of which, Adrian appeared on the balcony, impeccable in his navy blue suit. "Victoria has organized a press conference for tomorrow. We need to control the narrative before speculation gets out of hand." Rachel felt her stomach turn, and it wasn't because of her pregnancy. "Press conference? Adrian, I don't know if you can do it," he approached, placing a soft kiss on her forehead. "Besides, I need you to accompany me to the Maritime Foundation's benefit dinner tonight." "Tonight?" Rachel almost knocked over a cup. "But I have nothing to wear, and all those people. I've already taken care of that." Adrian smiled, gesturing to Jenkins, who entered carrying several boxes with famous designer logos. "And as for the people, they'll just have to get used to it. You're my choice, Rachel, the mother of my child." Margaret discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone. Rachel opened one of the boxes, revealing a stunning emerald green dress that perfectly matched her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the delicate fabric. "It matches the mask you wore that night," Adrian commented, his eyes sparkling with the memory. "Did you know I kept that mask hoping to meet you again?" Rachel felt tears forming, yet another of the many hormonal changes she was experiencing. How do we go from being strangers at a party to this? "Maybe we were never really strangers," he replied, taking a seat next to her. "That night we talked about everything, literature, music, dreams. You made me laugh like no one has since my parents died. I knew there was something special there." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Victoria, carrying a folder full of documents. "We need to go over a few points before tomorrow's press conference. Rachel, your story needs to be consistent." "My story is simple," Rachel replied, a sudden courage rising in her voice. "We met at a party, fell in love, and are now expecting a child. The rest is nobody's business." Adrian smiled proudly, while Victoria arched an eyebrow, impressed. "Well, it looks like you don't need my advice so much after all." The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparations. A team of professionals invaded the mansion to prepare Rachel for her first official appearance as Adrian Richardson's companion. Hairdresser, makeup artist, image consultant, each doing their best to transform her into the version society expected. "You look beautiful," Adrian whispered when she finally came down the stairs in her emerald green dress. But do you know what I love most? That I can still see the same woman who enchanted me at that party. The drive to the New York Yacht Club, where the charity dinner was to take place, was silent. Rachel watched Newport's historic mansions pass by the Bentley's window, each telling its own story of love, power, and tradition. Take a deep breath. Adrian held her hand as the car came to a stop. They can judge, they can talk, but in the end, it's the three of us against the world. The flashes started as soon as they got out of the car. Rachel felt the comforting grip of Adrian's hand on her waist as they climbed the stairs to the club. Inside, the hall was packed with the cream of Newport society, all eyes on the most talked-about couple of the moment. "Adrian, darling," Charlotte Kenneth approached, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And this must be Rachel, isn't it? What an interesting meeting of the two of you." "Yes, it was," Rachel replied, maintaining the posture Margaret had taught her. Sometimes fate has a peculiar sense of humor. Adrian could barely hide his proud smile as he led Rachel through the hall, introducing her as his companion, leaving no room for speculation or judgment. With each introduction, with each conversation, Rachel felt her confidence grow. "See, that wasn't so hard," he commented later as they danced to a slow song in the center of the ballroom. "It's still strange," she admitted, resting her head on his shoulder. "All this attention, these people, they'll get used to it. And if they don't," Adrian shrugged, "we can always move to that trailer park in Providence." Rachel laughed for the first time, completely relaxing that evening. "Now that I like to see Adrian Richardson in a trailer park. For you," he whispered in her ear, "I'd even live in a tent." The music continued to play, and gradually the curious looks and whispers subsided. At that moment, dancing in the arms of the man she had known behind a mask, Rachel realized that perhaps modern fairy tales were just like that. Imperfect, complicated, but true. The morning of the press conference arrived with a typical Newport fog enveloping the Richardson mansion. Rachel nervously adjusted the navy blue blazer Victoria had chosen, specially designed to disguise her growing belly, while observing the transformation of the main hall into a makeshift media center. "Remember," Victoria instructed, checking her notes for the 10th time, "keep the focus on the love story. No details about the masquerade party or how you started as a governess. The less information, the better." "Do you want me to deny who I am?" Rachel asked, her voice calm but firm. "I want you to protect the Richardson legacy," Victoria replied, but was interrupted by Adrian entering the room. "The only legacy I care about right now is the one we're building together," he declared, his presence immediately changing the dynamic of the room. "Rachel, can we talk in private?" He led her into the library, his favorite refuge in the mansion. The scent of old books and leather mingled with his perfume, creating a comforting atmosphere that always calmed her nerves. "Don't let Victoria or anyone else dictate your narrative," Adrian said, pulling her hands. "Our story is unique, and it's ours. But what about the board? The shareholders?" Rachel asked, remembering the speculative headlines in the local papers. "I've already taken care of that," he smiled, that smile that had won her over at the masquerade party. "Actually, I have a surprise for you after the press conference." A soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was Margaret, carrying a small antique box. "I found this in your mother, Mrs. Richardson's belongings," she said, handing the box to Adrian. "I thought maybe." Adrian opened the box, revealing a delicate sapphire brooch. "It was my mother's. She always said she'd wear it the day I met someone special." He carefully attached the brooch to the lapel of Rachel's blazer. The deep blue of the stone perfectly complemented the tone of the fabric. "Now you carry not only our future," he murmured, "but also a part of our past." The moment was interrupted by Jenkins announcing that the journalist had arrived. Rachel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the brooch as a tangible reminder of her new reality. The press conference started promptly at 10 o'clock. Flashes exploded from all sides as Adrian and Rachel positioned themselves behind the podium. Victoria had organized everything meticulously, from the positioning of the cameras to the pre-approved questions. "Mr. Richardson," began a reporter from the Providence Journal, "how do you respond to speculation about the nature of your relationship with Miss Foster?" Adrian smiled, his hand finding Rachel's on the table. Some call it fate, others coincidence. I prefer to think that there are moments in life that transcend our expectations and carefully laid plans. Ms. Foster, another reporter chimed in. How was the transition from employee to Mr. Richardson's companion? Rachel felt the gentle squeeze of Adrian's hand, giving her courage. Life rarely goes the way we plan. Sometimes it takes courage to accept that love knows no hierarchies or social conventions. The answer caused a buzz among the journalists, and Victoria looked like she was about to have a heart attack, but Adrian smiled proudly. After the press conference, as the last journalists left the estate, Adrian led Rachel to the car. "Where are we going?" she asked, noticing that Jenkins was heading towards the port. "Remember when you told me, that night in Boston, about your dream of watching the sun set over the ocean on a sailboat?" Rachel felt her heart race. At the masquerade party, they had shared dreams and desires that had seemed impossible at the time. The Calypso, the Richardson family yacht, was waiting for them in a private harbor. The crew was already in place, and an intimate table had been prepared on deck. "Adrian, this is a new beginning," he added, helping her aboard. "Away from the stares, the expectations, the judgments. Just us." As the Calypso sailed gently through the waters of Narragansett Bay, Rachel watched Newport recede into the horizon. The stately mansions of Bellevue Avenue looked tiny from there, reminding her that sometimes you have to distance yourself to gain perspective. "Do you know what I loved most about you that night?" Adrian asked, as they shared a meal prepared by the yacht's chef. "Your authenticity. Even behind the mask, you were genuinely you. And now?" Rachel played with the sapphire brooch. "Am I still the same person?" "No," he answered honestly. "Now you're stronger, braver, and I couldn't be prouder to have you by my side." The sun began its descent over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rachel rested her head on Adrian's shoulder, feeling the sea breeze caress her face. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," Adrian smiled, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "Now we write our own story, one chapter at a time." The headline in the Boston Globe the morning after the press conference couldn't have been more sensational. Newport's fairy tale. From housekeeper to Mrs. Richardson. Rachel folded the paper with a sigh as she watched Adrian talking on the phone in his office, his tense expression indicating that the conversation was not a pleasant one. "No, Aunt Eleanor, it wasn't a coup," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "And no, I don't need you to come to Newport to sort it out." Rachel knew that tone. It was the same one he used when something bothered him deeply. In the last few days, since her pregnancy had become public, the Richardson relatives had started to appear like ants after the rain, each with their own opinion on the scandal. "Your Aunt Eleanor is coming from Boston," Adrian announced after hanging up the phone, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Apparently, she won't take no for an answer." "Is she very important to you?" Rachel asked softly, moving closer to him. "She practically raised me after my parents died," Adrian replied, pulling Rachel into his arms. "She's the only family I have left apart from the baby you're carrying." The sound of tires in the driveway interrupted the moment. Margaret appeared at the office door, her expression worried. "Mrs. Eleanor Richardson has just arrived." Eleanor Richardson was exactly as Rachel had imagined. A woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed in Chanel, with an air of authority that made all the staff straighten up as she passed. "Adrian, darling," she greeted, completely ignoring Rachel's presence. "We need to talk in private. Anything you have to say can be said in Rachel's presence," Adrian replied firmly, his hand finding hers. Eleanor finally turned her gaze to Rachel, studying her as if she were a piece at an auction. "So this is the housekeeper." The disdain in her voice was palpable. "Rachel Foster," Rachel introduced herself, maintaining the composure she had learned over the last few months. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Richardson." "I imagine it is," Eleanor replied dryly before turning to Adrian. "Do you have any idea what you're doing with your family's legacy? With everything your parents built?" "I'm building my own legacy," Adrian replied, "with the woman I love and who is carrying my child." "So?" Eleanor paled, staggering slightly. Margaret quickly brought a chair for her to sit on. "Are you pregnant?" Rachel instinctively put her hand to her belly, with a small bulge was already visible under her dress. "Yes, I am." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor stared at Rachel's belly, her hands trembling slightly. "Eleanor." Adrian knelt beside his aunt, his voice softening. "I know it's not what you expected, but your mother kept a diary." Eleanor interrupted him, her voice distant. "She wrote about how she met your father in similar circumstances. She was his secretary at the time." Rachel and Adrian exchanged surprised glances. "What? Newport society never knew," Eleanor continued. Her grandparents created a whole elaborate story about meeting at a charity ball. "But the truth," she took a deep breath, "the truth is that sometimes love doesn't follow social conventions." Margaret discreetly left a tray of tea before retiring, leaving the family in privacy. Rachel watched as Eleanor took something out of her bag, an old leather diary. "I thought I'd bring this to make you see reason," she admitted, "to show the importance of the Richardson traditions. But maybe," she held out the diary to Rachel, "maybe you need to read this more than Adrian." With trembling hands, Rachel opened the diary. Elizabeth Richardson's elegant handwriting told a story of forbidden love, of secret meetings in the gardens of the mansion, of an unexpected pregnancy that ended up uniting two people from different worlds. "Your mother would be the first to defend our love," Adrian said softly, his hand finding Rachel's over the diary. Eleanor watched the gesture with watery eyes. She always said that the true Richardson legacy was not in mansions or business, but in the courage to follow one's heart. At that moment, as if feeling the emotion of the moment, the baby moved inside Rachel. She took Eleanor's hand, surprising everyone, and placed it on her belly. "This is the true Richardson legacy," Rachel said softly. "A new generation born of love, not convention." Tears finally escaped Eleanor's eyes when she felt the baby move. "Elizabeth would be so happy," she whispered, finally allowing a genuine smile to light up her face. The rest of the afternoon was spent with Eleanor sharing stories about Adrian's parents, showing old photos, and, little by little, allowing the barriers between her and Rachel to begin to fall. "You know," Eleanor commented as they watched the sunset from the balcony, "maybe Newport really does need a little more true love and fewer appearances." Rachel smiled, feeling Adrian's arm around her and the comforting weight of Elizabeth's diary on her lap. Some stories, she realized, needed to be repeated so that traditions could evolve. Elizabeth Richardson's diary became Rachel's favorite nighttime reading. Each page revealed more similarities between her story and that of the late family matriarch, as if an invisible thread connected the two women through time. Sitting in the mansion's library, she absorbed the words written decades ago, finding comfort and strength in their shared experiences. Still awake, Adrian's voice surprised her. He had just returned from an emergency board meeting in Boston, his suit slightly wrinkled after the long day. "Your mother wrote something interesting here," Rachel replied, carefully marking the page, "about how she also faced resistance from Newport society. Apparently, some of the same families who criticize us today did the same to her." Adrian sat down next to him on the leather sofa, loosening his tie. "The board is worried about the repercussions in the press. The stock has dropped 2 points since the pregnancy announcement." "I'm sorry," Rachel began, but Adrian interrupted her with a soft kiss. "Don't be. They need to understand that some things are more important than numbers on a spreadsheet." He put his hand on her belly, where her son was growing a little more every day. "How's our little secret today?" Excited, Rachel smiled. "Dr. Morrison says everything is perfect." Eleanor even insisted on coming to the last appointment. The mention of his aunt made Adrian smile. Eleanor's transformation over the last few weeks had surprised everyone. From a staunch opponent, she had become one of the couple's biggest supporters, especially after reading her sister-in-law's diary again. "Speaking of Eleanor," Adrian began, looking suddenly nervous, "she delivered something to me today." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Rachel's heart raced as she recognized the distinctive shape. "Adrian, it was my mother's engagement ring," he explained, opening the box to reveal a dazzling sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. Eleanor said Elizabeth always wanted it to be worn by someone who understood the true meaning of love above social conventions. Tears began to form in Rachel's eyes as Adrian knelt in front of her. "I know we did everything out of order," he continued, his voice laced with emotion. "We started with masks, secrets, and an unexpected pregnancy. But now I want to do it the right way." "Rachel Foster?" He took her hand, the ring gleaming in the soft light of the library. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? To build our own legacy together, based not on society's expectations, but on the love we share?" Before Rachel could answer, they were interrupted by the sound of restrained applause. Margaret and Eleanor were standing outside the library, both with tears in their eyes. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered, but Mrs. Eleanor insisted on seeing if he'd finally worked up the courage. Rachel laughed through her tears, turning her gaze to Adrian. "Yes," she replied simply. "1,000 times yes." As Adrian slid the ring on her finger, she couldn't help noticing how perfectly the sapphire matched the brooch he had given her weeks before. Another invisible link connecting past and present. "Elizabeth would be so happy," Eleanor commented, coming up to hug the couple. "She always said that true love has the power to transform not just two people, but entire generations." That evening, after Eleanor and Margaret had left, Rachel and Adrian remained in the library, planning their future. Elizabeth's diary lay between them, its yellowed pages holding stories of a love that, like theirs, defied the conventions of Newport. "I was thinking," Rachel said, playing with the ring on her finger, "we could get married here in the garden of the mansion, like your parents did." "On one condition," Adrian smiled, pulling her closer. "No mass this time." Rachel laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. To the library window, the lights of Newport flickered in the distance, reminding her of how her life had changed since their first night in Boston. From housekeeper to fiancé, from secrets to revealed truths, every step of her journey had led to this moment. The baby moved again, as if feeling the joy of the moment. "I think someone is approving of our plans," Rachel murmured, guiding Adrian's hand to her belly. "How can I not approve?" he replied softly. "After all, it was this little one that brought us together for good." The news of Adrian Richardson's engagement to his former housekeeper rocked Newport like an unseasonable hurricane. The Providence Journal devoted an entire page to the story, comparing it to the great romances of literature. But it was a small note in the obituary that captured Rachel's attention that morning. Caroline Mitchell, 32, died in car accident in Boston. The name of her former assistant, the only person who knew her secret from the start, made Rachel drop the teacup she was holding. The fine china shattered on the marble floor of the kitchen, drawing Margaret's attention. "Rachel? Is everything all right, dear?" "Caroline," Rachel whispered, her hands shaking as she clutched the newspaper. She was my friend, the only one who knew about the masquerade party from the beginning." Adrian, who had just entered the kitchen, immediately realized the gravity of the situation. "Jenkins, get the car ready. We're going to Boston." "That's not necessary," Rachel protested weakly, but Adrian was already at her side, helping her to her feet. "She was important to you," he said softly. "And now she's part of our story too." The drive to Boston was silent, punctuated only by the sound of fine rain beginning to fall. Rachel vividly remembered her last conversation with Caroline 3 months earlier, when she had decided to take the job at the Richardson mansion. "You're crazy," Caroline had said, laughing, "but maybe that's exactly what fate needs." The funeral was to take place at St. Paul's Church in the heart of Boston. When they arrived, Rachel noticed that there were few people present, mainly former colleagues from the events company where they had worked together. "Miss Foster?" An elderly woman approached, her eyes red from crying. "Amata Mitchell, Caroline's mother. She talked about you a lot." Rachel felt her heart squeeze. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Mitchell." "Caroline was a gentle soul," Martha added, then noticed Adrian's presence. His eyes widened in recognition. "Oh, so it's true. Caroline was right about you too." "What do you mean?" Adrian asked gently. Martha took an envelope out of her handbag. "Caroline left this for Rachel. She said that if anything happened to her, I should deliver it personally." With trembling hands, Rachel opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and some photos from the night of the masquerade party. Photos she hadn't known existed. In one of them, captured unnoticed, Adrian and Rachel were dancing, their Venetian masks glittering under the hall lights. "Dear Rachel," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means that our last date in Boston really was our last. But I couldn't leave without telling you how proud I am of your courage. Keeping your secret was an honor, but now it's time for you to tell your own story. The masks we were aren't always physical. Sometimes they're the ones we put on our hearts. P.S. Keep these photos. Some love stories deserve to be documented from the beginning." Adrian held Rachel as she cried silently, the photos still in his hands. Martha watched them with a sad smile. "Caroline always said that she had witnessed the beginning of something magical that night," she commented. "She'd be happy to see that she was right." After the ceremony, Adrian and Rachel walked to the hall where the masquerade party had taken place. The place was closed for renovations, but the security guard, recognizing Adrian, allowed them in. "It was here," Rachel said softly, stopping in the center of the empty hall. "You were wearing a black suit and a gold Venetian mask. And you looked stunning in green," Adrian added, pulling her into his arms. "When I asked your name, you laughed and said that names didn't matter that night. Caroline lent me that dress." Rachel smiled through her tears. "She said I deserved a fairy tale night, and we ended up living one." The baby chose that moment to move energetically, making Rachel laugh through her tears. "I think someone wants to take part in the memory too." Adrian knelt down, speaking directly to Rachel's belly. "Know that your story began with a lot of magic, little one, and special people like Caroline helped make it possible." Back in the car, Rachel held the photos carefully, as if they were precious treasures. "Can we put them in the baby's album? So he knows the whole story, including the part where his mother pretended to be just a housekeeper for weeks?" Adrian teased gently. "Especially that part," Rachel replied, resting her head on his shoulder, "because it shows that sometimes we need masks to find our true face." During the drive back to Newport, the rain finally gave way to sunshine. Rachel fell asleep holding the photos, and Adrian couldn't help thinking about how fate worked in mysterious ways. Caroline, even after leaving, had found a way to solidify their love story even more. The wedding invitation rested on Adrian's office desk, its elegant calligraphy announcing the union that Newport had talked about so much. Rachel looked at it with a mixture of anxiety and happiness, her hands unconsciously caressing her 6-month-old belly. "Is the guest list ready?" Eleanor asked, meticulously organizing the spreadsheets that cover the table. Wedding planning had become her personal mission over the last few weeks. "Almost," Rachel replied, adjusting the sapphire brooch on her dress. "But there's something I need to discuss with you." Adrian looked out from the documents he was reviewing, immediately noticing the seriousness in his fiancée's tone. "What is it, love?" "I want to invite my mother," Rachel said simply, her voice trembling slightly. "I know she's, well, you know, but she's my only family." The silence that followed was heavy. Eleanor and Adrian exchanged meaningful glances. They all knew that Rachel's mother still lived in the same trailer park in Providence where Rachel had grown up, refusing to accept any financial help from her daughter. "Rachel," Adrian stood up, approaching her, "of course we should invite her. She's our son's grandmother. But what about the press?" Eleanor questioned softly. "You know what they're like. They're going to make a feast out of this story." "Let them," Adrian declared firmly. "Isn't it about time Newport learned that value isn't measured by bank account?" Rachel felt tears forming in her eyes. Yet another of the many hormonal changes that were still taking her by surprise. "I need to go and see her in person. Explain everything." "I'll go with you," Adrian decided, leaving no room for argument. The Haven Hills trailer park hadn't changed much since Rachel had left to try life in Boston. Mobile homes, some more well-kept than others, still lined the narrow streets, and children still played in the small front gardens. "Number 47, Rachel pointed, her heart racing at the sight of the familiar faded blue trailer where she had grown up. Wildflowers still grew in the planters she herself had installed years before. Nancy Foster was sitting in a rocking chair on the small porch, knitting something that looked like a baby blanket. Her hair, once brown like her daughter's, now showed streaks of gray, but her green eyes, the same ones Rachel had inherited, still shone with the same intensity. "Mom," Rachel called softly, climbing the porch steps. Nancy looked up from her knitting, and for a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. Her eyes widened at the sight of her daughter's protruding belly and the dapper man accompanying her. "So the newspapers were right," she finally said, putting her knitting aside. "My daughter is going to marry Adrian Richardson." "Mrs. Foster," Adrian came forward, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Nancy ignored the outstretched hand, reaching up to touch Rachel's belly. "How many months?" "6," Rachel replied, covering her mother's hand with her own. "It's a boy." Something softened in Nancy's gaze. "Come on, I've made lemonade. It's still your favorite, isn't it, Rachel?" Inside the small but impeccably clean trailer, Rachel watched her mother pour lemonade in a simple glass tumblers. The lace curtains she had made years ago still adorned the windows, and photos of Rachel at different ages decorated the walls. "Your father would be proud," Nancy said suddenly, surprising everyone. "He always said you were born for something bigger than this place." "Mom, no, let me finish," Nancy interrupted, her eyes meeting Adrian's. "When I saw the news about you, I was afraid that my daughter was being used, that her heart would be broken. But now, seeing you together," she paused, reaching for the baby cardigan she was knitting. "Now I see the same look your father had when he looked at me." Adrian held Rachel's hand, who was crying openly now. "Mrs. Foster, I love your daughter more than anything, and I would love for you to be a part of our lives, your grandson's life." Nancy smiled for the first time since they had arrived. "Well then, I guess I need to finish this coat, don't I?" The rest of the afternoon was spent with Nancy showing old photo albums, telling stories of Rachel's childhood, and slowly allowing the barriers she had built up to begin to fall away. When they finally said goodbye, Nancy hugged her daughter tightly. "Your father always said that true love knows no social boundaries." I think he was right. In the car driving back to Newport, Rachel rested her head on Adrian's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For helping me reconnect with my mother. For accepting my history, my past." Adrian kissed her forehead softly. "Your past is part of who you are, and I love every part of you." The sun was setting over Providence as they passed the sign indicating the exit to Newport. Rachel smiled at the thought of her son being born into a world where love and acceptance prevailed over prejudice and social divisions. A world that she and Adrian were helping to build, one heart at a time. The morning of the wedding rehearsal brought with it an unexpected storm. The gardens of the Richardson mansion, meticulously prepared for the next day's ceremony, faced the gusts of wind as the decoration team struggled to protect the arrangements and structures. Rachel watched the goings-on through the library window, her hands resting on her almost 7-month-old belly. The little Richardson heir was especially restless that morning, as if she could feel the energy permeating the mansion. Worried about the weather, her mother's voice surprised her. Nancy Foster had arrived the night before, finally accepting the invitation to stay at the mansion during the wedding preparations. "Not really," Rachel smiled, turning to face her mother. "I was thinking about how life takes turns. A year ago, I was organizing events for other people, and now you're about to become Mrs. Richardson," Nancy added, lovingly adjusting a lock of her daughter's hair. "You know, your father used to say that rain on the day of the rehearsal brings luck to the wedding." "I thought that applied to the wedding day," Eleanor commented, entering the library with a pile of papers. "The latest confirmations have arrived, including a surprise that Adrian has prepared for you, Rachel." Before Rachel could question, Margaret appeared in the doorway, her normally composed face showing unusual agitation. "Miss Rachel, I think you should see this." In the foyer, a group of people were waiting, familiar faces that Rachel hadn't seen since her days as an event planner in Boston. Her old team, complete with the assistants who had worked with her in Caroline at the fateful masquerade party. "So please." Adrian emerged from behind the group, his smile beaming. "I thought you'd like to have your original team helping with the last details." Rachel felt tears welling up, once again blaming pregnancy hormones as she hugged her former colleagues. Melissa, her former junior assistant, couldn't take her eyes off her belly. "Caroline would be so happy," she whispered during the hug. She always knew there was something special about that night at the party. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. The Boston team, working in perfect sync with the Newport team, turned the chaos caused by the storm into an opportunity to rethink some elements of the decor. Nancy and Eleanor, to everyone's surprise, formed an efficient duo in coordinating the last details. "Your mother has an amazing eye for decoration," Eleanor commented during a tea break. "That suggestion to change the flowers on the altar was brilliant. Years of packing up our little trailer with limited resources have taught me to be creative," Nancy replied with a shy smile. The ceremony rehearsal was scheduled for late afternoon. When the storm finally began to let up, Rachel was in her room, trying on the dress she would wear for the rehearsal, when a soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called out, hoping it was Margaret with the final adjustments to the dress. To her surprise, it was Adrian, looking nervous and carrying an old box. "I know it's against tradition to see the bride before the wedding, but that doesn't apply to the rehearsal, does it?" Rachel laughed, noticing how young and vulnerable he looked at that moment. "What have you got there?" "Something I found in the attic last night," he replied, opening the box carefully. Inside was a pair of Venetian masks, the same ones they had worn that night in Boston. "I thought we could keep them to tell our story to our son one day." Rachel picked up her mask, her fingers tracing the delicate golden details. "How did you get it?" "Caroline," Adrian smiled sadly. "She retrieved them after the party and sent them to me a few weeks ago, along with a letter that wasn't to be opened until after the wedding." The baby chose that moment to kick particularly hard, making Rachel laugh between tears. "I think he approves of the idea." Adrian knelt down, pressing a soft kiss to Rachel's belly. "Hey, little one, tomorrow we're going to make official what our hearts have known for a long time." The afternoon rehearsal went perfectly, as if the morning storm had washed away every last doubt and worry. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the mansion's gardens in golden light, Rachel knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Ready for tomorrow?" Adrian asked as they danced to one last song after the rehearsal dinner. Rachel looked around, her mother chatting animatedly with Eleanor, her old team mingling harmoniously with the mansion staff, Margaret overseeing everything with her discreet smile. "More than ready. I finally feel like all the pieces have fallen into place." "No regrets," he teased softly. "Not even for wearing that mask that night?" "Especially for wearing that mask," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes we need to hide to find our true essence." Night fell over Newport, enveloping the Richardson mansion in a blanket of expectation. Tomorrow, a new story would officially begin. No longer a story of masks and secrets, but of truths and promises kept. The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden glow that seemed to bless Newport. Rachel watched a reflection in the century-old mirror in the master bedroom of the Richardson mansion, her wedding dress, an exclusive French lace model, falling perfectly over a 7 months pregnant figure. "You look stunning," Nancy whispered, delicately adjusting her veil. Her hands, calloused by years of hard work, moved with surprising delicacy over the fine tool. Eleanor entered the room, carrying something in her hands, the tiara that Elizabeth Richardson had worn at her own wedding. "Something old?" she smiled, placing the piece delicately over Rachel's elaborate curls. "And something blue," Margaret added, attaching the sapphire brooch to the bouquet of white peonies. Rachel touched the small bulge of her belly, where her son was moving gently. "And something new," she smiled, making all the women laugh with excitement. Outside, the gardens of the Richardson mansion had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. The previous day's storm had given way to a perfectly blue sky, and the dewdrops on the newly opened flowers sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. Rachel's old team from Boston had exceeded all expectations in the decorations. Crystal lanterns hung from the century-old trees, their soft lights creating an ethereal atmosphere even during the day. The path to the altar was marked by white petals and small glass sapphires that caught the sunlight. "Rachel," Adrian's voice sounded through the closed door. "May I come in?" "Adrian Richardson," Eleanor exclaimed, horrified. "It's tradition not to see the bride before the ceremony." "Since when do we follow conventional traditions?" he replied, making Rachel smile. "Besides, I have something important to deliver." Rachel gestured for him to come in. When Adrian saw her, he stopped abruptly, his eyes filling with tears. "You look perfect." He held up a familiar box, the same one that contained the Venetian masks. "I thought we could wear these during our first dance," he suggested. "One last masked moment before we live our lives without disguises." The ceremony began promptly at noon. The justice of the peace, a close friend of the Richardson family, smiled as he saw Nancy Foster leading her daughter down the carpet of petals. The music, played by a string quartet, was a soft version of the same melody that played the night they met. The vows were written by themselves, words that came from the heart and spoke of predestined encounters, of masks that revealed more than they hid, and of a love that transcended social classes and conventions. "Rachel," Adrian began, his voice laced with emotion, "you taught me that sometimes we need to lose ourselves in order to truly find ourselves. That night in Boston, behind Venetian masks, I found not only the love of my life, but also the courage to be who I really am." "Adrian," Rachel replied, tears streaming freely down her face, "you showed me that fairy tales can happen in unexpected places, whether at a masquerade ball or in the corridors of a mansion in Newport. I promise to always be true, even when the truth seems scary, because our love was born from a beautiful lie that turned into the purest truth." When the judge declared them man and wife, the little Richardson heir chose that moment to give a particularly hard kick, making Rachel laugh in the middle of the kiss. The reception was a perfect blend of elegance and simplicity. Round tables scattered around the garden mixed guests from all walks of life. Wall Street executives sitting next to trailer park dwellers from Providence, Newport socialites sharing stories with the old Boston events team. During the first dance, Adrian and Rachel put on their Venetian masks one last time. Under the soft lights of the crystal lanterns, they danced to La Vie en Rose, just like that first night. "Look," Adrian whispered in Rachel's ear, discreetly indicating a corner of the garden. Nancy Foster and Eleanor Richardson were sitting together, laughing like old friends as they leafed through what appeared to be Elizabeth's diary. Margaret watched the scene with a satisfied smile, pouring champagne for some nearby guests. "I think we did it," Rachel murmured, resting her head on her now husband's shoulder. "We managed to unite not just two people, but two whole worlds." As night fell over Newport, the stars seemed to shine with special intensity over the Richardson mansion. The guests slowly said goodbye, taking with them not only memories of an exceptional party, but also living proof that true love knows no barriers. Rachel and Adrian remained in the garden lawn after the last guest had left. Sitting on an old swing, they watched the lights of Newport reflected in the bay. "Do you know what I love most about you?" Adrian asked softly, his hand resting on Rachel's belly. "Your courage to be true, even when it would have been easier to keep hiding behind a mask." Rachel smiled, picking up the Venetian masks that rested on her lap. "We'll keep them for our son, so that he knows that sometimes we need to lose ourselves a little to find our true path." The Venetian masks, silent witnesses to a love that began with a secret and blossomed in a truth, now represented not a disguise, but a reminder that the best fairy tales are those written in imperfect ink on the real pages of life.